To get started, you're going to need the Dark Magic intro starter files, and you should be able to download those as a zip file from our server, from the class, or from the website that you're looking at. Okay, once you do that, you're going to unzip that file, and then this is the contents of the folder that the zip file has. And you'll see that we've got the following pieces and parts, right? So there's a thunderclap. I'm not going to play these in completion. Okay, you see we've got a loop of strings for dramatic effect. We also have some constant rain with a little bit of background thunder and lightning. We have a video that has no sound, and it is the lightning video, and you'll see that it's fairly long. I'm going to sort of fast forward through it, and you get some really bright spots here, and right, there you go. And there's also this dramatic loop. And you can see that it starts to get a little bit faster and faster. Okay. And so we're going to use all these things layered together in order to create that indent, along with some text that we're going to create. So to get started, the first thing that you might want to check out is you could look at this lightning in a sky file, and you can get some information about it, and you can see that it's 1920 by 1080. And so I'm on a Mac, and I'm just messing around with my screen view of my Finder window. If you're on Windows, you can do the same thing. It's going to look a little bit different, but you can get a list view or the view that shows you more information about the file that you're looking at. Anyway, but you can see that this lightning in sky is 1920 by 1080, and that's the resolution that I would like. So what that means is that I'm going to go ahead in After Effects, and I'm going to tell it that I want to do a new project. And when you're in After Effects, there's some different ways that you can create compositions. In a different tutorial, I've shown people how to intentionally set up composition that will just allow you to set all the parameters yourself. Like for instance, if you're doing an Instagram campaign and your footage doesn't match the format that you want to do, right? Maybe the footage that you shot isn't going to be square format. All right, that would be different. What we're doing is pretty standard. It's going to be a standard YouTube ratio, standard. Well, and actually I should back this up and say if this were for a film, you would want to make sure that you actually set the proper ratio based on, you know, what the film would actually be. And so for some films like that would be shown in a theater, it would be a slightly different ratio than say the regular YouTube ratio. So let's go ahead and we're going to say new composition from footage. And it's going to allow me to go and find where I want that. And I think mine's on my desktop. And we've got this Dark Magic intro starter files, right? And then I'm going to choose Lightning in Sky, and it's going to pull that in. And then what it's done right off the bat, you can see over here on the left, is that it has imported the asset, which is in this little QuickTime video icon, and right above it, well, on mine it's QuickTime, yours might be different if you're on Windows. But right above it is the composition. It looks like some little graphic elements in the thumbnail picture, right? And that means that it's a composition, and it has now created a composition in here. And so let's just really quickly, as a recap, go over the interface for After Effects just super fast. And before we get too deep into that, let's just go up here to Window and then Workspace. And what you can do is set it to the default workspace if you want. All right, that's one option. And then you end up with your timeline on the bottom. That's what this area is that's highlighted in blue now. That's the timeline on the bottom. This area up here is where you look at your composition, or this tab right here will show you a specific layer. We're going to go back over here to composition, but we'll get into layer in a little bit, but this is, by the way, one of these pitfall things where people get pretty confused. If you accidentally double click on a layer down here in the timeline, then you'll notice that what it does is it jumps to the layer tab up here. And sometimes people get confused because, you know, this whole scene changes and then they're no longer looking at the full composition, they're only looking at the media that's in that layer. And so to get out of that, all you have to do is click on this tab. Okay, so the other thing is over here on the left is your bin. And so it has like your different assets and your compositions. And then up here is like a little preview area. So if I were to click on this lightning in the sky, it would show me the preview of that video. And it shows me some information about it as well, with all of the format information and the resolution and so on. Okay. And then the other thing too is it tells me that it's been used one time. That means that it's only got one instance somewhere in my timeline. You can use an asset more than one time, right? And so it'll tell you how many times that thing is being used up here, which is kind of handy. The other thing that you've got over here on the right side is you've got all these different tabs, and like character, for instance, I could look at paragraph, I could look at effects and presets. All right, we're going to go through all these different things. But your default workspace is going to look like this, all right, where you can access your tabs and panels over here. And then up, excuse me, up along this top area, you've got your arrow tool that will allow you to click and drag things around. You've got your hand tool, which allows you to move the sort of move around. For instance, if I were blown up, you know, at 200%, I would be able to move around. Let's get to a place where we could see. I'm blown up really big, so I could take the hand tool and I could move around. And it's not actually moving my document around. It's just allowing me to sort of navigate within it so I can see. But let's just take that back down to where it was before. I think it was at 100. I don't know where it was. Maybe it was at, let's do fit. That's probably what it was. Is it fit? And then we've got the magnification tool and some other tools up here, including these vector object tools like a pen tool and rectangle. And if you click and hold, you can draw other things like an ellipse, a polygon, and so on. But then you have your text tool. All right, and we're not going to get into all these tools for this demonstration, but we'll definitely talk about the text tool and the arrow tool for sure. Okay, so that all being said, now let's get started. The first thing that I want to go ahead and do is set the background color for my composition. And so I'll go down here to composition settings. And I want to make sure that the background is set to black, pure black. And you'll see here it's all zeros. And that's going to be important later for me whenever I'm doing stuff with my text and with my alpha channels. Yours might be set to white by default. It just depends. Or maybe if you did a previous demo where I showed you how to set the background to white, it might still be set to white by default because that was the last setting that you chose. So anyway, just make sure that your background is set to black, and then your width and your height should be set to 1920 by 1080 based on the video that you imported. If it's not, then there's something wrong. Square pixels and all the rest of this stuff should automatically be pulled in properly. The other thing that you could do too here is you could rename the composition if you want. So instead of it being the same name as the original video, let's name this Indent. Okay, and or if you want to call it something that's easier for you to remember, like maybe movie indent, something like that, we'll call this movie indent and click OK. And then the thing that is nice about changing that name is that now you'll see your composition over here has a different name than the asset that you use to start the composition. So it's a little bit easier to understand now whenever you're looking like at your timeline down here and you've got a layer that is named after the asset, you can see that it's that the composition is distinctly separate now from that asset name. Okay. All right, so I'm going to stop this here, and then we're going to move on to the next video to the next set of stuff when we get into text.